Hi, today let's talk about Metro Last Light. This is a game from which I transcribed 4 tracks for my students. It was funny watching how many of them wanted to play it when they heard that another student was learning it. Metro game is in post-apocalyptic style. If I understand correctly, the people who survived the Great War are to hide underground and to struggle for their lives. But they know that there is no chance it could become better with time. And this feeling of hopelessness is in this soundtrack for me. There is a lot to speak about, so let's make this as quick as possible. The first idea is exhaustion. Not only physical, but emotional too. And I didn't think that it can be transmitted via hammer-ons, pull-offs, and slides. Usually such techniques are used to add some character to your music. But if you play the second note a bit quieter than usual, you'll get that feeling of tiredness. Let's hear the main theme. It's the farewell. And in the echoes of the past. Another aspect is when protagonist remembers how he felt before the war. But what can love or tenderness mean in metro world? Whom to share it with? And it's very interesting that such emotions are translated with diminished chords. If you ask someone how diminished chords sound like, he most likely tells you about danger or anxiousness. But for me, in metro, the chords that have diminished triads in this basis, they will be diminished and half diminished seventh chords, are screaming, look, there are some good feelings left inside. This is how Last Light begins. And we can also hear it in the echoes of the past. And natural minor in the end tells us that these feelings are no longer working in such circumstances. And every other positive emotions can stay for too long. If we just look how long major chords last, well, not for too long. The hero can't reminisce good things while being frozen or hungry. For example, the 4th sentence in the main theme begins with major chord, but it quickly disappears. So in the last slide, the breath. This is maybe the only one remaining sign that a man is still alive. Usually we don't pay much attention to this, but I clearly hear it in Metro soundtrack again and again. Or the next thing is key selection. Imagine that you find yourself in such circumstances, you're exhausted and indifferent, and you find the guitar in an abandoned tent. You'd barely be using some extended techniques to represent your emotions. Probably you'll play something very simple. And what could be simpler than standard guitar tuning and A or E minor key? So I think this choice was made reasonably by a composer. Now let's consider these tracks one by one. In last slide, we can find C major chord in the second measure, but this is very unusual place for it as it appears occasionally. You may suggest that there is a dialogue between major and minor chords, but I disagree. For me, the C chord has a specific feeling of a light smile. In the farewell, the most important chord is F major 7th chord. It gives to a track a specific kind of goodbye. Due to its not just being a plain major chord, it somehow asks us what this experience means for us. There are a lot of things going on in the main theme. Intro, for example, we start with an octave and slide to a third. That's okay, that's how we outline the key. And then E, C to B. And then minor 9th to a tritone plus octave. It may sound like the main character finds the guitar and tries how different notes sound with E. He doesn't fear using dissonances because there's no one left to blame him. And if he is satisfied with these notes, he confirms it with his right hand finger after the glissando. In the main theme, there are a lot of chords played on bass strings, which are a bit dirty. Such madness is not good for classical music chords, but they sound very appropriate in metro setting. Another interesting thing is playing bass notes slightly before the upper voice notes. When you start a guitar one day, a teacher suggests you to play like this. At first it sounds very beautiful for your ears, but when you begin to play like this constantly, you may find it too sweet. In metro, guitarists plays like this, but surprisingly, it doesn't sound so romantic as we can expect. But the most unusual for me in metro soundtrack was that some common playing techniques don't work as well as in the other musical pieces. For example, every musician knows that long notes sound beautiful if they are played with vibrato. And due to our using it all the time, it becomes some kind of reflex. But in metro, vibrato works poorly for me. It's like a technique from that old world we've lost. Vibrato doesn't express something that's in the main hero reality. Also, there is not much strength left for the vibrato. Let's hear how it sounds with vibrato. And without. So it was hard to play Metro without using vibrato and to stay expressive at the same time. That's what I wanted to tell you about my Metro playing experience. See you.